A black Catholic deacon comes to me and says, will you paint Jesus as an African American? And with all my Orthodox training, I say to him, well, Jesus was not African. How can I do this? How can I paint Jesus as an African when he wasn't an African? And yet the man says, it means a great deal to us, those of us in the Catholic Church who are not Caucasian, to be able to identify somehow with God on our own terms. And I thought, well, that's nice. I'm all for trying to help you feel good, but still I'm responsible for what I paint. I can't paint heresy. I can't paint falsehood. And so I go into this wrestling match that I've described of, okay, how do I look at the ancient tradition and how do I justify what seems like the good thing to do? Because if I can't justify it, I'm not going to do it just to make somebody feel good. But how can I justify it to the best of my ability on theological terms? Well, the thought came to me. We have several accounts in the gospel of resurrection of Jesus. One of the very interesting ones is when Mary Magdalene is by the tomb on Sunday morning, and someone walks out of the tomb and she thinks it's the gardener. And she says, please, sir, tell me where you've hidden his body and I'll go get it. And it's only when he says her name that she realizes it's Jesus speaking to her. Whereas in another gospel, and many of the other gospel accounts, Jesus walks through a wall or something and he appears to the apostles, the men, and they immediately recognize who he is. Then I thought about my own patron saint, Robert of Newminster, who was a Cistercian abbot who was called to the door one time, and there was a beggar outside asking for food, and there wasn't a lot of food in the monastery, but he took half of his food and gave it to the beggar. And as soon as he did this, the beggar disappeared. Or St. Martin of Tours, ancient Christian bishop, who cuts his cloak in half and gives it to a beggar, and then the beggar disappears. And in each instance, it was Christ appearing, but not the way Christ was expected to look. And then I thought of Matthew 25, whatever you did to the least of my brothers or sisters, you did to me. It's not as if you did it to me, you did it to me. From the moment of the resurrection, Jesus is no longer singular. That Jesus is head of his body, the church, that the head will never again be complete without the body, and the body, humankind, will never be complete without the head, so that Christ becomes many. Thinking through all of this, who would have recognized Jesus more than Mary Magdalene, who I have no interest in even thinking about the Da Vinci Code and all of that, but rather Mary Magdalene, who wasn't arguing like the apostles over who was going to sit on the right or the left, but paying the bills. She was a wealthy woman who with other women paid for what the apostles and Jesus needed when they traveled through Galilee. She was paying attention to him as a human being. The apostles were all about themselves so much of the time. Maybe it was because Mary was strong enough in her faith to be taken to a new level at the moment of the resurrection, whereas the apostles were still weak, and they needed to see Jesus exactly as they remembered him. And that from the moment of the resurrection, Jesus the Christ has become a cosmic figure, and that we do not know how he will appear to us, just as Martin of Tours, or the expression in Matthew's Gospel, that we are going to encounter Christ in one another, and that Christ has the possibility of being depicted in other ways. So yes, I finally ended up painting a black Christ, an Apache Christ, a Korean Christ. And the response of people of faith from those various races has been so overwhelming of how these images have helped them to understand better how they relate to Christ. You know, the images of saints and the images of Christ and the Mother of God, these are images that we are meant to imitate, to emulate. When you are told, when you are given saints that are monastic, celibate, male, white, middle class, or wealthy, what does that say to you when your skin is brown, when your skin is black, when you are poor, when you are married, sexually active? That somehow you have to become like somebody you are not in order to be holy. And the holiness that Christ brought to us in his gift of the Holy Spirit is a holiness open to all human beings.